All right, so we have a new episode of Legends and Leaders, and today it's great to have Adam here, founder, CEO, PrizePicks, fantasy sports app. Been in the CRM space with influencer marketing, pioneered a really unique approach there, and now you're really kind of disrupting the game here with the opportunity to have a lot more people involved in this fantasy sports market. So excited to get into your story.
I appreciate you having me, Ben.
Awesome. So, where did the kind of this idea for even just like a step back, where did you kind of start with your entrepreneurial journey? Like, how did you what was it kind of your first foray into this space initially?
I'm a consumer like everybody else. I've been playing fantasy sports for a long time. As a consumer, I'm more of a fantasy season-long league kind of guy. I grew up playing fantasy football, fantasy baseball, dabbled in fantasy basketball even, but it was always season-long for me. Great way to, build camaraderie with friends and keep in touch with friends and dog on friends. So always enjoyed it over the last couple of decades. And then, I've been a tech entrepreneur for my whole career. And back in 2014, it was a matter of just scratching my own itch. Every fall would roll around, 12 friends or more get together. Somebody's got to be responsible for collecting the money to make it a little more interesting. And so our original product in fantasy sports was helping the fantasy league commissioner out, streamlining that process because it's often, in my opinion, known as the most thankless job in the world.
For sure. So, where did this idea to put together an app that made this more accessible to other people kind of come from? Was it just this problem that you have? Like, why channel and focus that with an app and something that can be more widespread on mobile?
Yeah, so Prize Picks is actually the third product that kind of came about from this journey that I've been in almost over the last decade in fantasy sports. Just to quickly walk you through the progression. So the first product was meant for fantasy league commissioners. Quickly realized that was a very seasonal product and solution. So said, what else can we do with this digital treasure? And that led us to the notion of, during the season, people are often challenging each other. So why can't we basically facilitate a means why, I'm playing you this week, let's put $100 on it. Our second product, known as Side Prize, essentially held that money in escrow. We built the hooks into season-long platforms like Yahoo and ESPN, so we could monitor the winners and the losers, and you could get paid without having to chase it down for me if you beat me. So that was the second product. We were scaling that up in 2015, and that's when the bottom of the industry kind of fell out later that year. And so stuck with the industry, even though there was a lot of, turmoil going on 2015, 16, 17, but, 20 different states or so, passed fantasy sports legislation and kept an eye on those bills and what was going to be acceptable and ultimately came back with a new product in fall of 2017. And, essentially that became Prize Picks. And we haven't really looked back since.
And why did you guys decide to focus on kind of a unique way to be involved in fantasy sports, which is tying in different types of sports and kind of having them together in your picks for them? Like why focus on these new ways to interact in the space?
So the best way I can answer that is, I saw this concept of daily fantasy sports, coming out in the last decade, but I never really liked the execution of it. Like it made complete sense as a niche, as an industry, but I just didn't believe that was the only format that was going to be around and the one that was being popularized, namely salary cap. And so with the previous product, we had been exploring how to basically chop up the season long format because that tends to drag on for a long time. That's where kind of Side Prize came about, and that was more of like a weekly contest. But then I always kind of knew that from a revenue standpoint, it was a much better business model if you kind of moved it into a daily format. And so then it really just became a matter of what's the most mainstream accessible daily fantasy format that we can come up with. And we looked at the laws. We built a business that really kind of took the minimum requirements of fantasy sports contests, which also meant that it was going to make it that much easier to play. So you didn't have to spend hours studying every single player across the sport, everybody you're playing against. Once again, the salary cap format was very cumbersome, and so we just wanted to simplify a daily fantasy sports concept, and ultimately, Prize Picks was born.
Mhm. Do you think that your knowledge in the CRM influencer marketing space is really what helped propel the app to get out there? Because you guys do have like a very influencer focused strategy with it.
Yeah, my whole career has basically been colliding over the last year because my first tech startup was actually in the music discovery realm. And so spent a couple years doing that. That ultimately, financially was a failure. But the learnings that I took from that, the network that I built from that kind of, led me to my second chapter, which was, as you were describing, essentially a CRM for micro influencers called Insightpool. And worked with some of the biggest brands in the world, with that software that we built. And then ultimately, bringing it to the here and now. Yes, to your point, always knew the power not only of kind of celebrity influencers, but also micro influencers. And so, when it came to our partnership strategy, it kind of started out as more of these kind of niche influencers, people that were quite entertaining when it came to making player predictions. And then it's over the last year or so, definitely expanded into more of the kind of entertainment sphere where it's people that are in the entertainment world that just really like sports and they really like making predictions on sports as well. And so ultimately, being able to find some of the most relevant partners that we can was a huge part of that strategy. And when I say it also brought in my kind of experience in the music industry because we've also got partnerships with a handful of folks in the music industry as well these days.
Mhm. So you have this like unique strategy of 100% deposit match. Like once you up to a certain amount of money that you put in, why come up with a strategy like that? And has that really helped accelerate growth?
Yeah, we actually went through. I'd say the early days. We actually offered free entries to start before
Hmm.
before we ever expected anybody to deposit. But I think we definitely figured out, over time that in order to really get people from sign up to depositing, we needed to kind of put the deposit portion up front. And obviously we want to motivate people to deposit and have enough money to play with because you're not going to win every time, but playing our form of daily fantasy you're going to win a lot more often than you would having played the previous forms of daily fantasy. So we found the sweet spot being that match it up to 100 off of your initial deposit, and it's performed pretty well for us.
Hmm. So when you were like a digital and social strategy consultant for the Atlanta Hawks, did you kind of see then this like gamification in fantasy sports, like the potential of that was like there, was that kind of one of like the turning points for you, or was it more like later on?
Yeah, I was brought in by the Atlanta Hawks CEO Steve Koonin when he joined the team in 2014. It also happened to be as I was phasing down from my previous venture and thinking about a couple new ventures. And yeah, it just so happened that I was able to get into the sports industry in two different ways, and my experience working with the team was definitely kind of enlightening and kind of seeing it from a different side of the industry and definitely kind of helped out from the more entrepreneurial side and more fantasy sports point of view. But in reality, the work that I did kind of helping out with the Atlanta Hawks during their record breaking season 2014-15 was a fun time to be around the team. We won 60 games. We were on Sports Center a lot just for 19 wins and doing different things with our Twitter and our Spotify account. What I'm probably most known for during that tenure is kind of helping put the map out the strategy around what was known as swipe right night, um, where we basically allowed Tinder happened to be blowing up at the time, and we basically created an environment where guys could meet girls and vice versa, and all at a basketball venue. So definitely had fun. But a lot of it, once again, just came down to having had experience in social media, having spoken at a lot of social media conferences, early part of last decade through my previous venture. The Atlanta Hawks CEO just thought that I was one of the better digital marketing experts that he knew in his network. So he pulled me in, and it was a great experience.
Mhm. So how important is it to foster a community around what you're building? I mean, you guys have a vibrant Discord, hundreds of thousands of members. They seem to be really engaged. You're consistently putting out content to engage with the community about the product. Like, how important is this like real community and being in touch with them to what you're building?
It's huge. Uh, you know, I, you know, as I tell people, over the coming year, you're going to kind of see a transformation with Prize Picks. Like right now, a lot of people, like our identity is largely like this fun to play, easy to play, real money game. The first thing I want people to think of when they hear the word Prize Picks in the future is this super vibrant, hyper engaged, sports fan community of people that just enjoy placing picks on a daily, weekly basis, and talking about it, sweating it out together, celebrating, sulking, whatever it looks like. But that's the Prize Picks experience, and we're barely scratching the surface, and kind of tying it together with another one of your other questions, like what's the future, of what that looks like, is the community is going to continue to grow, going to continue to be more and more interactive, and then we're going to marry that with everything that we've built up on the partnership side, and so we're going to start to include more of our partners inside of the community, and you can find the community, like you said, best within our Discord, but also it's super vibrant as well on like places like Twitter as well.
Mhm. So, some of the similar apps in your category, these like fantasy sports apps, sometimes they can take them time to pay out. You guys prioritize paying out when you win, et cetera, pretty quickly. Do you think that that's something that's helped with recurring customers and given trust with the platform overall?
100%. Um, you know, I saw an opportunity when I first entered this space that, nobody was answering support tickets in real time. So I said, hey, we're going to we have the opportunity to bring an American Express like level of support to this industry that's never experienced that before. So I saw that as a big opportunity overall. So how we basically scaled very methodically in the early days, like we weren't trying to rush out of the gates. We wanted to make sure the unit economics were strong. We wanted to make sure that we had the proper resources to serve the number of customers that we were serving. And so just establishing those kind of foundational elements was super key. And then, obviously we've stepped on the gas over the last couple of years. We've seen great success, but all the while, like we describe it as, wanting to deliver a 6-star member experience. There's a lot of these rating scales are 1 to 5 stars. We want to be that 6. We want to deliver that 6-star experience. So we often challenge ourselves. Well, what does that 6-star experience look like? I think in many areas, I'd say we're currently a 4 or a 5 relative to our peers. But we're always, challenging ourselves to do better, especially when we're the ones setting the bar,
Yeah, for sure. It's a good attitude to have. So when you just kind of walking a little bit back at him, like when you were starting up PrizePicks initially, was it something that you guys self-funded or you brought in funding? Like how was it just kind of getting the initial funding to get the business going?
Yeah. This one's been a very interesting journey because, when I got in, fantasy sports was a very hot space. Back in 2015, you know, everybody wanted a piece of fantasy sports, or at least that was the first half of the year. And then by the end of the year, nobody wanted to touch fantasy sports. So we actually participated in the LA Dodgers accelerator program back in 2015. Thought we were going to come out of the program, raise 7 figures, and start to scale up that second product. And instead, because the AGs were coming in and saying all of fantasy sports was illegal gambling off of, what DraftKings and FanDuel had been, aggressively marketing, and, just they were top of mind for everybody. But it kind of, like I said before, the bottom of the industry kind of fell out and nobody wanted to touch any fantasy sports operator at that point in time. So we came back to Atlanta, having been in Los Angeles for a handful of months, and we were scaling down instead of scaling up. So that was brutal. And then, we came up with PrizePicks. Basically, fast forward to, 2018, it was still, people were still kind of scarred from, a couple years prior. Throughout the last, call it 5 years, it's been interesting to see the types of investors that were ready to make, to want to put money behind a premise like this. It's definitely a very interesting industry to navigate from a regulatory environment standpoint, and more recently, from a competitive environment. It's I think there's a lot of different businesses that can scale a lot of different ways. In our case, very conveniently, we were the business model was very conducive to largely being bootstrapped. But in the grand scheme of things, we've built this business off of game profits, off of strategic equity financing along the way. We've got some interesting, people such as the Poker King Phil Hellmuth, NBA world champion Andrew Bogut, a number of random interesting investors as well. And then the last thing being, we've definitely leaned on creative debt financing along the way. So we've been able to maximize our shareholder value through limiting dilution. And I think we could, one of these days we'll give a master class on kind of how we did just that.
How do you balance like some of the legality aspects of it? Is it something that I think that can be something that could be a little trickier. Like, how do you kind of find the right balance in terms of what product you're going to offer and services?
Yeah, the environment definitely is moving. It's a very dynamic environment, but you obviously lean on the right legal counsel and make sure that they're telling you kind of what are the goalposts, basically. But those goalposts move, with each passing year. So it's definitely something you got to kind of stay on your toes about. But it's an exciting industry. It's an exciting space. I think the laws in many states are still getting drawn up, but fantasy sports laws date back to this carve out from 2006, and obviously as a result of that, the kind of daily fantasy industry was born in the first place in the late 2000s and really emerged last decade. And there's been a whole new wave of innovation over the last 5 years.
Mm-hmm. So, based on your experience being on the board of the Fantasy Sports and Gaming Association, like where do you think the industry is really heading in terms of adoption and legality frameworks over the next couple of years?
Yeah, it's good. It's a good question. I would hope that there's going to be a lot more innovation, and we're at the forefront of that right now. It's unfortunate that there's some in the industry, in the broader industry, that want to maybe verse against that and not necessarily support the innovation. Let's just put it that way. But as far as where things go from here, there should be all different kinds of games. At the end of the day, what the purpose of the regulations is more than anything consumer protections. But it's very evident that sports fans, especially ones in domestically, really want to have a layer on top of the games that they're watching, and as a whole, that is described as fan engagement. And the fan engagement, whether that be fantasy sports betting, other varieties, like there's a lot of different things that or ways that can look. And ultimately, we just want to find our niche. And ultimately, like I said before, in the grand scheme of things, we want people to know us more for our community than the game. One of the things that we're going to be releasing before you know it is a free-to-play version of our game that should be available in basically the whole country before you know it. We're also in the process of introducing peer-to-peer versions of our game. So there's a lot of innovation that PrizePicks is doing beyond what people see right now in their app. So be on the lookout in the future.
Yeah, it seems like also like you guys are proud about that you paid out, I think, over $650 million to different members of the game. Some of these similar category apps are not as proud of that. They don't want to mention kind of what they've given out. Why is it like you mentioned earlier, like the support ticket answering and kind of this angle of being more consumer friendly? But why do you think that that's kind of been something that's really that is really the focus of the business now? And why do you think that that's something that will further kind of help you with a legality framework and things like that?
I mean, it goes back to just being customer first, what we call member first, in our mentality. I think a perfect example is, what happened over the last 2 Monday Night Football games. Aaron Rodgers going down, season-ending injury, 4 plays in. Nick Chubb, brutal injury. Feel horrible for those guys on a personal level, but you also got to think about our customers and kind of what about all the people that put their hard-earned money down on making predictions on people like that, on players like that. And so in an instance like that, we've spent a long time developing this concept of what we call the reboot policy. And this basically is a perfect example of how we have our customers back. And we want to make sure that we remove chance as much as possible and really play to the fact that what we've built for them is a game of skill. And, when your player goes down unexpectedly to the game ending injury like that, you shouldn't be it's not fair for you to be for that pick to be out of play, and so we want to keep you in the game, and that's exactly what the reboot policy is for.
Well, Adam, that's all the questions I had. I appreciate you coming on. I think you guys have built something really great here that's really provided a new experience to a lot of different types of sports fans out there. And I'm excited for the free to play version and the other products that you're going to release down the line.
Absolutely, looking forward to the public seeing more about it.